Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back. This is going to be my last video blog for Vapor number 2 because this game is done. I am super happy with how it came out. Um, we played a linked game for the first time the other night and it was super fun. I'm really happy with how everything turned out with this, but it was a little bit of a battle that I'll get into later on. But let me start with the simple stuff. A fair amount's been done since the last video, but on paper, not really a whole lot. Things like the marquee has been replaced. This is a new old stock, matches our other one and looks great. Threw an LED tube in there instead of a fluorescent, which I really like. Don't have to worry about the marquee deteriorating or delaminating or peeling or any flaking or anything like that because it's much cooler than a fluorescent. And then let's see. So yeah, marquee, new old stock, and new bulb. Speaking of bulbs, replaced both start button bulbs with LEDs, just like the other one. Coin door lights. Let's see here. A lot of cosmetic stuff. Oh, got the new old stock grills thrown on here that we picked up, and those turned out great. I really like how those look. Speaking of grills, so you can't see this. I'll show some video of it, but on the back of the seats is a grill. Well, here's an original one, and these things, I've never seen these clean before, and unfortunately I couldn't find any new old stock ones. But originally, on the back of the seats, there's a grill like this, and it's got the Vapor TRX logo. It's I think this is supposed to be like a vapor cloud, and then on the back, you know, both sides have that blue. And if you'll recall in the last video, since our grills were both absolutely crap, I was going to paint. Well, I did paint both of them this blue. I had it color matched, and I was just going to leave it at that because there's nothing to really salvage. You can't really mask around this, and so I just decided, okay, we're just going to do blue. That'll look pretty slick, and I'll throw that on the back of the seats. Well, what ended up happening is after we did the speaker grills, we decided, you know, we like the black ones on the other one. And I was kind of toying around with the notion that, oh, you know, maybe we'll have one cab that has black grills and the other one has blue. We can tell them apart and people can call, okay, I'm gonna, you know, dibs on the black cabinet, whatever. But, you know, the black speaker grills look great. And I've seen these cabinets with both styles, whether it's blue or black. I've seen both. And the back seat grill on our original one was also black. And so we were kind of toying around the notion, you know, maybe we'll just leave that one black and then we'll have this one be blue. And so we're going to leave it at that. But then you know, it's kind of, you know, things roll around in my head and I'm like, you know, it'd be really nice to take it one step further and get this, at least the little lettering, the Vapor TRX on there, because even the small NOS grills have TRX on there. And so I started digging around and I was looking at images online, and but I could not find this exact Vapor TRX logo, like this exact text where the TRX kind of overlaps with the Vapor. I was looking at images and I just couldn't find anything. It's not at all like the main marquee logo. And so I'm digging around on there, and then it just hits me like right in my face. The manual actually has that exact logo. It is on the very first page. The title is that exact logo for that speaker grill. And what's great about that is that since it's a PDF, it's fairly easy to upscale, but also it's black and white. And so I got in my head, okay, well, I'm not a very good Adobe Illustrator. You know, I'm pretty basic when it comes to using Illustrator, but vectorizing something like that is easy peasy. And so that's what I did. And then I went to one of these stencil companies that could laser cut it onto Mylar. And that's what I did. I got some stencils made. I got 2 of these made. And so I stenciled that onto those seat grills. And so with the blue one, we did white, just like the mini grills on the seat. And then on the black one, we did the blue that was color matched to the grills. And They're not perfect, but man, they came out really nice, way better than I originally visioned. And I think they look really slick on those seats. It almost looks factory, but not to get too high on my horse here, but I think they came out really nice. I'm really happy with them. Okay, so next I installed these edge protectors I got off of Amazon. They're these black aluminum edge protectors that you'd use like on corners on your wall. And I did that because we're not doing a full restore, and the artwork on these games, both cabinets have beautiful artwork except for the bottom edge. You know, there's a few scuffs and whatnot, but for the most part, it's really nice. But the vinyl's starting to peel at the bottom and there's some exposed wood. So I put these protectors on there and they kind of double up as not only protection, but aesthetically they look good too. And that way they'll prevent the vinyl from any more damage. And so I feel pretty good about that. Normally I wouldn't do something like that if I was doing a full restore, but I think these look pretty darn good. And funny thing about those edge protectors is that when we were installing them, I discovered that this cabinet is actually missing all 4 of the casters that normally would be mounted underneath the cabinet, which probably accounts for a good chunk of why this was a difficult game to move. Not just all those tokens, but the fact that this was missing those 4 casters made a huge difference. And so we installed those, and I didn't record footage of that, but I got those 4 casters installed, and now the game's much easier to maneuver around. Aside from that, got the compact flash card installed, that upgrade, so no more mechanical hard drive, everything runs nice and smoothly. And then I added a handle just like the one on the other cabinet, so it's a lot easier now to maneuver the cabinet, especially if you're trying to tip the cabinet to get it like on an appliance dolly or whatnot. So then with all that stuff done, the big issue that I needed to tackle was this whole speed issue I was having with the board. To put it simply, if you'll remember in the last video, I was talking a little bit about this, but one board on our Vapor 2, the game was playing like 20 to 25% slower than our other Vapor TRX, and it was just driving me crazy. And I ended up going down this big rabbit hole to get that resolved. And I actually recorded a separate segment where I go over that in detail, and I'll just cut to that now. Okay, so I pulled one of the main boards that I have, now that I have several of them. I thought this might be an easier way to explain the speed differences and the issues I ran into with regards to the speed. But let me just back up quite a bit. When I first pulled the monitor out of the game and I rebuilt it, so I had it out of the cabinet and I was dialing in the picture, and so I had the game running, and I just happened to be watching the attract mode, and just something seemed off. Like I couldn't quite pinpoint it, but the game just seemed to be running slower. But it wasn't until I recorded some video that it was very obvious. And I'll show you, I'll cut to that now. But what I did was I set up my camera and I recorded about 2 minutes of the attract mode on both my original Vapor that we got last year and then this one that we just picked up that appeared to be running slower. And I synchronized them frame by frame and just let them run as like a side-by-side comparison. And it was very, very obvious that this one was running a good chunk slower than our other Vapor. And when I looked at my timeline with both attract modes, it was roughly 20 to 25% off, I figured when I did a frame count. And so I went down this big rabbit hole trying to figure out what would cause that. Why is this game running slower? I started checking simple things like, is the game getting 5 volts at the chip? Is it the hard drive? So I eliminated those things. I got the power supply dialed in to exactly 5 volts on the chip. I grabbed the compact flash card that was in our other Vapor and plugged that in here to eliminate the hard drive from being a cause of the issue. And so I eliminated all these variables. And eventually I got onto the interwebs and started studying this hardware. And so what you're looking at here is our original Vapor TRX board from our first Vapor that was running perfectly fine, 100%. And they refer to these as Seattle. They refer to these as Seattle boards because that's a hardware platform. This is the Seattle hardware platform, and several games run on this hardware. In fact, if you wanted to convert a game that uses the same hardware, this is, for instance, this is like the main board, right? All you would have to do is replace these 3 ROMs. These are basically, I think, let's see, one is like the sound chip, one's a security chip, and one's like the boot chip. So you'd just replace these 3 ROMs, and then the software, which runs off a hard drive, that here's the IDE port for that. So fairly simple. But with that said, so Atari had a few games that ran on this hardware, and Midway also had a few games that ran on this hardware. Now, with that in mind though, there are actually 4 different speeds that this board can run at. Most of the games run at 150 megahertz, and a few games run at 200 megahertz. For instance, Vapor runs at 200 megahertz. What's interesting though about this is that although most of these games use the same processor, the speed for it is actually controlled by this chip here. This is the U50 location. It's this PLCC chip, which in order, if you want to remove it, you need one of these guys. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. So I'm discovering that various games run at different speeds. Vapor runs at 200 megahertz, Blitz and a bunch of the other games run at 150. And I'm looking at the board that's in my cabinet, and it's got a Betson service tag on it. So Betson at some point serviced the board that was in that Vapor TRX. And the next thing I notice is that there's a label on all these boards that has a model, like a revision number. The Vapor TRX boards in general have something along the lines of like this one's 11048. Pretty much every Vapor that I've seen since now has had that revision. Older boards have a number, like for instance, Blitz has a number like 10860. So it's a lesser number. So clearly this board came out later, for instance, than Blitz. But anyways, as I'm going down this rabbit hole, so I'm starting to analyze parts. And I was talking about this chip at U50 that sets the speed for the processor. And just like this one, in fact, this is an old chip. This is from one of the other boards because I've since replaced it in the cabinet. But I realize that the chip that's in that board is setting the processor to 150 megahertz. So that game essentially is running at 150 megahertz. So I'm like, well, there's your problem, right? My guess is that at some point there was a problem with that Vapor TRX. There was a board issue. Betson came out to the operator's location, pulled the board, and they said, well, hey, Vapor will run on, it'll run on any of these boards. We'll just swap it out with a Blitz board, swap these ROMs and the hard drive, and away you go. And of course, the game will run, but it'll run slower. And so that's my theory. They swapped the board out, didn't bother with the processor speed or any of that jazz. So I'm like, okay, well, I need to get this game working at 200 megahertz because it sucks to be running at a slower speed. Why would you want it to be running at a slower speed? And so the first thing I do is, so let me just talk about these chips here. Basically, the bulk of these chips will have a bunch of things on the label. It'll say, like this one says Seattle, and then it's got a part number A-21859 and the location U50 with a copyright. Almost all of these are going to be running, setting the processor to run at 150 megahertz. If it was the proper chip for, like, say, Vapor or any of these other games that run at 200 megahertz, it would have another line that would say 200-U50 or something like that. So it would actually have 200 written on there. Now, one interesting thing about that chip too is that the next hardware platform that came out after the Seattle, I discovered also use in fact, the same exact processor and a similar chip. And that platform is called Flagstaff. An example would be Rush the Rock runs on that hardware platform. And so I found a parts board, knowing that platform runs at 200 megahertz, same chip, same processor as Vapor. I found a parts board for like 50 bucks shipped or something like that. It wasn't working, but it had that chip. And that was pretty much the cheapest way I could obtain one. So you can see it says, Flagstaff, U50, I don't know, it's got a part number as well. So that was my first order of business. I'm like, okay, well, if I can get one of these chips that's the proper, that will set the processor to the right speed, that should do it. And so that was the first order of business. I grabbed this chip off that Rush the Rock board. I pulled the wrong, the slower PLCC chip. I snapped this guy in there and fired the game up. And to my amazement, it looked like it was running at the proper speed. It looked absolutely great. I thought I was in business. And so just to verify that, I got out my camera again, recorded this, the attract mode, compared it to my original Vapor. And at first I thought I was in business. It was running much faster. But when I measured it up in my timeline, I realized that it was actually running ever so slightly faster than my original Vapor. Now the problem was the other way around. Now it's running too fast, but it was so minor. It was running, I was counting frames for when it would get to a certain part of the attract mode. And that was kind of my benchmark, right? And it ended up being, if my math is right, like just under 4% faster. So not even that much, just ever so slightly. And I could not figure that out. I'm like, well, why is this running a little bit faster? And so once again, I was eliminating variables. This time around, I decided I'm not even gonna mess with it. I grabbed the original PLCC chip off of my original Vapor that had the 200 labeled on it I was talking about. So I made sure that this chip was exactly the same. In fact, I even swapped the processor to see if that would make any difference. And no, it would still run ever so slightly faster. And I'm just scratching my head. Like I just couldn't believe it. Like what would be causing this? Because all this should be identical in theory. So I even grabbed the 3 ROMs off of my original board and I slapped those in there. Still nothing. Still running about 4% faster. And so now at this point, I'm just scratching my head. Now, mind you, I don't know, I haven't tried linking these games yet, and so I don't know if that's an issue or not. All I know is that the games are running at very slightly different speeds, albeit not nearly as bad as when it was running at 150 megahertz. But still, there's a little discrepancy there, and honestly, it's bothering my OCD. So what I did next was I thought about it. I'm like, well, I can either find another exact same revision. So this is a 11048, as I was mentioning. I could find another 11048, or I could find another Blitz board, because that's what came in our Vapor 2, our second Vapor. And then I could just throw the proper PLCC chip in there, and the game would run at the same speed as it is right now, that 4% faster. And that's what I ended up doing, because I couldn't find another Vapor board, but there's a bazillion Blitz boards out there, and they weren't commanding a whole lot of money. I found a working one for, I think it was like 95 bucks shipped or something like that. And I pulled that chip out, and now, I had a couple of the proper speed PLCC chips, and I threw that in there and got out my camera and verified, and yep, it's running at the exact same speed. So all I can figure is that there's something else going on here with these revisions of boards that ever so slightly throws things off. Um, but yeah, so that was my long-winded rabbit hole of dealing with the speed thing. And I actually forgot to mention one other thing. I've been talking about this chip here and kind of neglecting the processor. The processor in all these games, for most of them, is the same. But when I got my my working Blitz board to swap out with our other Vapor, upon first power up, it wasn't working. The screen was absolutely blank, and there's 3 LEDs. Let's see, where are they? Oh, here they are. The little LED code. But I was getting nothing on the screen, and usually you'd get like one that would be green. They'd go through a little cycle, and then it'd just be a green LED. But they were just constantly blinking, and I couldn't figure that out. You know, I had the right speed chip in there. I reseated it. Everything else looked good. I was getting power, all the things, and I couldn't figure that out. And so I pulled this chip out of there, and I put the original in, the slower one, and the game booted right up. And I'm like, okay, something else is going on here. And I've seen where these can cause some issues before. But then I noticed that the processor actually had a label on it. So it actually had a label on it, and I'd never seen that before. All of these boards, and I've looked at probably 5, 6 of these boards, and they don't have anything, nothing labeled on there. And so it got me curious, and I'm like, well, is this the problem? And so I pulled the processor off there, and I threw a different one on there that wasn't labeled, that I pulled from one of my other boards, and the game worked just fine with the faster chip. And so all I can figure is that this processor here was an older one that wasn't capable of running at 200 megahertz. Because there's actually 4 speeds. I talked about 150 and 200, but there's also 2 other slower speeds, and I can't remember what those are. But I'm guessing that's what the issue was. But anyways, the game all works fine now. I've got a spare board here. This works, so if I ever need a spare board, I've got one, and there's never anything wrong with that. The only thing I didn't get around to testing that I'm still curious on, that maybe on a rainy day, I say that a lot, but that I would run that test, would be that even though there's a 4% difference between this board and the Blitz board, as far as speed goes, when the game's running linked, I wonder if that's an issue or not. Is the game still going to be running fast? Is that going to disrupt anything? Because I didn't try linking the games, and I'd be real curious because, you know, would those synchronize, and would the CPUs kind of sync up to where that, you know, little 3-4% of a speed difference is kind of a non-issue. So I don't know. I haven't tested that yet. But it's very curious to me, though. Still, I'm still scratching my head why between these board revisions there's that slight difference in speed. But yeah, I'll stop there. I've talked your ear off enough about this issue. But that's how I resolved it. I just have 2 of the same Blitz boards that I swapped the chip out so that the processor runs at 200 megahertz, and everything's hunky-dory. In fact, the game runs great, synchronized just fine, linked up, no issues. So, all right, that's enough of that. So yeah, that was quite the rabbit hole, and that ate up a ton of my time. It was just driving me nuts, but I'm really glad that that's all sorted out now. Both games are running the same board revision. They're running at the exact same speed. In fact, they're only like a couple frames different between each other. We played a link game like I was talking about, and everything runs perfectly now. So that mystery is solved for the most part, and I'm super happy with that. My OCD can rest now. But so with that said, the last thing I did was link these games up. And these games use a standard Cat5 crossover cable to link them up. If you have more than 2 games, you need to use a hub. But with just the 2, you can just run directly one Cat5 crossover cable. But with that said, I ended up using a couple of couplers with these because the little widget board that has the Cat5 jack on it has the jack pointing up in the cabinet, and it's like midways up. It's, I don't know, about yay high or so. And I didn't want to put a lot of stress on that because if you just run one cable through there, then you've got you've got gravity against you. And so I took a couple of couplers and some short crossover cables, and I just kind of tied everything down so there's not a whole lot of stress there. And then when you link these games up, like for instance, when we move these to CACs, all we have to do is open up the back door and the jack is just right on the inside left of the game. So real easy to link them up, and then you don't have to worry about the strain or the stress of yanking on that port, on that jack. So so yeah, I'm pretty happy with how everything turned out. And man, this game is super, you know, we thought this was fun before, but playing it against someone is infinitely more fun. So really happy with how that turned out. Real excited to bring these to CACs, and that's going to be here before we know it. I think it's what, like July 19th or 20th, that weekend, California Extreme. And so that's just a mere few weeks away, but that was my deadline, so I made it. The games are done. I'm super happy, and yeah, thanks for watching and sticking with me through this adventure, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.